Naiji experience, the Naiji awareness, is the anti-establishment vibe that the Naiji have. This comes from having Z and Vi as our furthest powers. They are the most unconscious to us, therefore they're the most foreign to us. This is not a good or bad thing, it's just simply the way we work. All mojos have powers that are the furthest from them. For us, that's those powers. It's Z and Vi. This gives us an anti-establishment disposition. That is, our natural way is to look at Z and Vi from the point of view of Na and Ji, which are as far away from those two powers you can get, and be like, what are they doing? What are they about? And our natural position, since our two top powers, Na and Ji, are completely opposite of those powers, we're inclined to find the most fault in the Z and Vi in the world of other mojos. Compared to other mojos, for them, Z and Vi is not as far away from them. From us, it's very far away. So we come from the point of view of what's it doing wrong, or why don't I have to listen to it? So, you know, all mojos have that they try to find reasons to not have to listen to their super offside and their super polar, or their unconscious offside or their unconscious polar. Like most things, it's not a question of good or bad, because it simply is, and it's amazing because we are evolved to be this heroic creature who has these special powers. It's a question of how do you deal with it, and when and why do you use it. So there can be noble revolution, change. I'll actually say more on the like reformation of evolution. So it is trying to change in the most positive, advantageous way. There is also a lot of Naiji in the world that are doing it more just neutral, which is they just want to change in any way possible. Sometimes you have to do extreme measures in order to make changes in areas where doing positive change, the weather is inclement there. It's inclement weather for doing positive change. So you do what you have to do, and Naiji come with a disposition of, if noble change needs to happen, you do what you got to do. So that's a good thing. However, sometimes that can be an excuse to just do what you feel like doing to a degree, and that's actually getting to where you're talking more about just anarchy. That's not really a revolution, that's just mayhem. Okay, so mayhem is not the same thing as a true revolution or reformation or evolution. And then going worse, and Naiji, I have to say, are here a lot too, is criminality. It has to be said that if you look at a lot of the homeless people, bums on the street, particularly ones that look a little intense, a lot of them are Naiji. A lot of the top criminal organization leaders, Naiji. A lot of the serial killers, Naiji. So that brings in other factors too, like the simulator gone wrong and a whole bunch of other crap. But it must be brought in that the Naiji have a special need and imperative to understand the way their powers work, because one, they can cause intense change in people's lives, which can be good or bad, and we will make sure it's good, if at all possible. And the fact that Z and Vi is a lot of what you would call the powers that be. So there tends to be extreme repercussions from the powers that be when Naiji do what they do, particularly in the anti-establishment department. So it's important for you to know what you're doing in that way and why. Naiji are something that other models of thought have attempted to try and figure out. They have not done it right because they don't know how to read people, they don't know how to fit it in with the rest of natural law. They're quite clumsy. But they do actually make attempts, and when they do, they often, because they don't read people properly, the correlation in their model of the Naiji which would be, for example, an MBTI. It would be sort of like an INFJ. In Kersey, I don't really call it, maybe is it like a protector or something like that, but it's the same thing, it's equivalent of the NIG. And there's other models that also do it, and they have more or less correlations, but they often stereotype the NIG, which you really can't do, because the NIG's ability to take different forms and extreme manifestations of different forms really makes that nearly impossible to do. And then there's the fact that they pretty much universally say that the NIG mojo, or what their correlations are, is the most rare. And from what we've seen, that actually isn't true. There's just a lot of reasons why NIG misread themselves and others misread them. And so that will be a topic they will go into a lot, because it's very, very important for NIG to know themselves and for others to know us. Laziness. This is something that is really interesting, because NIG actually had visionary drive, and when that's turned on, it's difficult to actually match the output that a NIG is going to do. I mean, it pretty much always borders or exceeds human ability, what's known to be human ability up to that point. But when that's not engaged, which can be two reasons: one, because the peak pathway is not going correctly, or we are in a percolating period. NIG spend a lot of time in percolation periods. So during those times, there's not much going on, and people who want sort of consistent output, they'll sometimes have difficulty dealing with the NIG, or the NIG may cater for that, that expectation, but then they're going to be innervated. That's going to require a lot of Xi and a lot of V on a regular basis in order to give some sort of like consistent unit of output. NIG don't come that way. All mojos have a peaking to them, like peak athletes, but NIG, their way demands that you look at like a peaking workout cycle. If you actually try, like as a metaphysical athlete, if you try and actually grind an IG through a very consistent workload, you'll get nowhere. We just don't operate that way. If you allow for the percolation and the building of the percolation to a culmination point, those culmination points will add up to output that other humans have a hard time actually matching. Our record-breaking performances in just about every field attest to that. Bad memory. Lots of NIG have this issue, although many other NIG are confused on this because they've worked their synomnia in a way that they're able to imitate the results of Vi. It's not actually Vi. They've actually managed to do a very high-level spell, which is cool they can do that, but they are confusing what's going on, and they're lifting a lot of weights that they may not realize they're lifting, that could be used for other things that are more natural and more productive and more powerful for the NIG to be doing. So lifting like what you consider to be classic memory, that's our 8th power. That is the least effective power for us, but we are masterful. All the hunters, they actually have a great importance in their psyche placed upon being masterful in some way. So those are 4 different ways. However, of the 4 hunters, the VIZ's masterful ways are the ones that are most obviously apparent to application for the powers that be. And the NIG is the one that it's least obvious how your masterfulness is useful to the world. So often NIG will attempt to mimic or imitate the mastery of one of the other hunters. That's very, very, very common. So again, that causes for a lot of misreading of the NIG by themselves and others. All NIG are HSP. It's just a question of how much and where they are of it. There are a multitude of reasons for having HSP, and the NIG have just about all of them. I mean, if you were to bonus stack a person to have HSP, NIG took all those options. So that's something you have to just accept as a given and get an understanding of how to use it, what to do with this HSP, what does it mean, what's its purpose. So in short, and there's a lot to it, we'll go in a lot of detail on this, but the HSP is what gives the Naiji their great vulnerability and their great ferocity, which together gives them a unique set of powers that no other Mojo has. I guess you could say it is our vulnerability that makes us so ferocious. It is our yin that makes us so yang. We are the yinnest of all the yang directed Mojos. So we are a directed Mojo, but we have the most sensitive, vulnerable way, but it ends up that our culmination, our ferocious apex, is therefore correspondingly massive, volcanic, in correlation to the yin percolation time of the Nai yang power. It's a yang power, it's a directed power. There's a reason for having the HSP, the polar V. There's a lot of reasons. In fact, Zai is really the one conscious power that helps out with the HSP, which is why our Zai works for a living. Oh my goodness, it works for a living. Kenseiing, that's a term you'll hear thrown out a lot. Any Mojo can do that. Being a Kensei or Kenseiing is when you take any worldly form, any worldly activity, any worldly experience or discipline, and use that as a way to like tunnel a portal into understanding everything, life, existence, meaning, what it's all about. Naiji have a natural propensity for this, and that's something we'll discuss a lot, is how different Naiji, they Kensei on different things. You can pretty much be a Kensei in anything. For example, there's like the ability to take elephants. There's a guy that we saw on TV who was like an elephant expert, and he pretty much was a very deep, profound guy that actually got that deep understanding from the elephants. He kept understanding the elephants more, but the more he understood them, in order to be a perfect, absolutely perfect, masterful, spiritually pure elephant expert, you kind of have to know about everything. That's kind of how Kenseiing works. In order to actually become the absolute best piano player that is like humanly or inhumanly possible, you end up having to kind of become a productively harmonious human, period. Because you can't actually be a Kensei of anything without becoming a noble, heroic individual. So that's good for all Mojos, but the Naiji, having Nai as the source and V as the polar, have a particular interest and necessity for the Kensei process. Yes, Naiji frenzy, we do. There's no way around that. And it's off the charts. If there was a frenzy contest, Naiji would win. It wouldn't matter what frenzy contest, we would win that one. So this is something that just has to be dealt with, and first is awareness. A lot of Naiji aren't aware that they have that, or they keep it, they're not aware, they keep it locked down, or they let it out for the wrong reasons. Okay, those are all wrong. The right answer is knowing what it is and letting it out for the right occasions, and then putting it back until it's needed again. And understanding that that is something that has to be let out on a consistent basis, like an artist that has to get its imagination, its inspiration, spurred and building up, but then it'll have to erupt. So these eruptions, they tend to look like frenzies. They're technically actually rather Naiji metaphysical energy surges, but they come out at V. The world will see often an extreme version of V. Now, this is something that actually can be confusing, because even the first three methods are wrong, as I mentioned, which is not knowing what it is, trying to hold it in all the time, or letting it out wrong. Is even people who actually frenzy correctly, Naiji tend to have that be related to what they have gone Kensei on, or other life experience factors. So the different frenzies that Naiji can do will look quite different from another one, until you know how to look at it. Once you actually know how to read any Naiji that you would come across as a Naiji, it doesn't matter, you know that's a Naiji, then the different kinds of frenzy and the different kinds of Kensei, they won't seem different either. but you'll have to understand the universal principles that are at play so you can do it better yourself. Naiji tend to actually have a fixation on being great, even if that has a spiritual context for them. Still, they want to really be spiritual. They want to be the most spiritual person who ever did spiritual stuff, which is great. And that actually lends Naiji the propensity for breaking a lot of records. Naiji probably hold the record. So far, the data showing that they hold the record for world records, and it's been trending that way for a while. So that's awesome, but then there has to be dealt with the fact that if you aren't quite where you want to be yet, that's a very uncomfortable experience for Naiji when they are trying to achieve greatness of spirit. The desire to get there and not having arrived yet, it's an intense pain and it's an agony that must be endured in order to get where you need to go. But there's a lot to that, a lot to being able to handle it, a lot to being able to use it correctly, that angst. But then, once you have achieved it, because Naiji have such an interest in greatness and doing unprecedented work and gaining renown for having done something truly original and exceptional, once you've achieved that, other humans treat you different. And that's something you have to deal with, is you're going to feel an intense weight on yourself as you try to reach the goal of greatness. You know, first greatness, second greatness, multiple greatnesses. But then once you have cleared a greatness line, you will introduce a weight into the environment. When you walk into the room, there is a heaviness that you will introduce that you'll have to account for when you're dealing with other humans. Naiji have great powers of persuasion, of charisma, you can call it manipulation when it goes wrong, but a term we'll throw around a lot that kind of encapsulates that is mind jobbing. And this actually sometimes has a negative connotation, but the way we use it doesn't mean negative. It can be, but it also can be extremely positive. It's simply a phenomenon, which is that Naiji are built to do a job on other humans' minds. We're designed that the way we think and the way we express we think will profoundly shift the perceptions and hopefully the code of conduct of those that we're talking to. Their perceptions and code of conduct for their life. So a good teacher, and Naiji make great teachers, will mind job their students. They will do a mind job on that student so that student learns, say, virtue. You'll get to where, man, they won't ever not want virtue again. I'll make it to where they're like, you kind of like give them a little thing where they see what it's like to be a person without virtue. And they're like, I don't want to be that person. And you're like, see, good. That's mind job. That's positive mind jobbing. I mean, you would make it a painful person if you can, but the point is that you're actually going to attempt to go in and change the way they think. You're trying to turn the tumblers of their psyche, and you're built to do that. So it's important that you know that, but that you know what an incredible responsibility that is, because as a Naiji, you have the ability to see insights and angles on people that when you start pushing buttons, they might not be the same ever after that. And that could be awesome, or that could be awful, and you have to take responsibility for that. For a variety of reasons, there are a lot of Naiji in pop culture. The Naiji, both the male and the female, are, for the male demographic and female demographics, they are the most represented mojo in pop culture, which is interesting because, as I mentioned, other models actually place the Naiji as having a great rarity. So you're like, which one is it? I think the Naiji are pretty much about as represented as the other mojos are as far as natural, birth rates and whatnot. But there is the issue of our desire to actually monologue in artistic, spiritual ways, philosophical ways. We want to move people. Often you need to get into positions where you have great sort of public sway. And for that reason, Naiji, although most of us are very, very shy, we still will sometimes strive to get into those kinds of positions to where people listen to what we say. That's important to us. And so if you look around for us, in pop culture, you'll see a lot of us because that's the field we play in. But not all mojos actually do that. So it may even seem like there's Naiji everywhere. Well, in pop culture, we're actually quite common. There are lots of reasons that the Naiji get misread, are extremely complex, are confusing to themselves and others, but the one above all is probably our gift for being a chameleon, for being a secret agent, to shift into characters in order to be optimized for given engagement. The fact that we think in those terms. So that's an awesome power, but it needs to be treated correctly, because Naiji in general, most Naiji tend to have extreme opinions on the subject that are inaccurate. Some actually take the point of view that being chameleon-like, shifting your character, is a character flaw, and you shouldn't do it. You should have, they have somehow got the feeling from the world maybe teaching them that they need a great homogeny in themselves. That's actually Vi. That's the world actually vying them. So Naiji need to know that is an incorrect way to go. Then other Naiji go the other route, which is everyone's a chameleon and those that don't know that are suckers. That's also incorrect, which is basically like, I'm allowed to use my chameleon power for any fucking thing I want to. That's incorrect also. So the best way to think about it is that in order to do art, in order to teach, in order to be the ideal deliverer of a delicate, very important, sensitive message. That shape-shifting ability that Naiji has evolved us to do those duties. In the human tribe, we're gifted at doing those things. So that's the noble use of it. So if you think of those terms, then that would mean using your shape-shifting to like con people or, you know, mind job them, play mentalist on them. That actually is not what you're supposed to be doing with the power. Not that mentalists are bad, but it's very like, I was actually referring to like the mentalist from TV, specifically him because he was bad, Patrick Jane. He's awesome, but he's naughty. So you're not supposed to be using your mentalist powers like that. You're supposed to use the fact that you have those insights in others and that you can present yourself in ways that you know will get certain reactions. Naiji are able to move, in fact, off their spirits, powerfully move them to contort into these forms. They almost feel like, I don't want to, but I'm becoming this creature in this situation. You need to understand what the process is and take control of it, so that you don't say it's bad and try to chain it down, because that won't work. We're way too shifty for that. We'll get out. The chameleon power, you can't chain it. It won't work. And so that's awesome. You can't chain an Naiji. Even if you physically chain them, you haven't chained them. So that's the beauty of it. So don't try to actually, you know, smother that beauty. Then on the other hand, you're making that beauty ugly when you use it just to get over on other humans. That's not what it's supposed to be there for. It's actually supposed to be there to help yourself and other humans go to higher places, both out in the world and metaphysically, to get to higher vistas. That's why it evolved. Having Nye Visionary Drive and the awesome simulator that we do, being Visionary Hawks, and the fact that we have the flex factor, we're moody. This moodiness, like a lot of Naiji powers, is something that you simply must understand, be aware of its comings and goings, and learn how to summon it and ride it correctly. If you attempt to hold it down, that either won't work at all, or you'll just be innervated by trying to hold that swing down so much when it wants to swing up. On the other side is, if you actually let it go free, then you'll go off the rails. You will go off the rails and you will do things that you will regret. So you have to take responsibility for your moods. So you want to use them and use them correctly. Naiji, along with the Zai-V, have a high propensity for being dissociated. That's having Nai and Zai as their conscious subjective powers, and being subjective mojos as well, which means we like to stay in our subjective world more than coming out. So Dissociation is a power that, again, is not good or bad. Well, it's heroic. It's supposed to be used good, but it's a tool. It's a tool that you're supposed to use heroically, but it can be used not heroically. So you need to know how the tool works and what the heroic purpose is. So for Naiji, that includes dissociation, because disassociation allows Naiji to go the correct way when they're being told by the world that they're going the wrong way. So it's good to not care in that context. But then if it goes too far, you can fall in love with not caring. And that's a bad thing. That means you become disassociated in the negative or sort of like clinical definition of the term. That's bad. So disassociation is part of the Naiji experience because of having Nai and Zai as their conscious subjective powers. But it's a power that's meant to be used to help yourself to be a better person and to help the tribe be better people. The doctrine of directedness is often a direct counterpoint to Fozen. Some Naiji actually believe that their intensity is something they have to lock down, and when they do that they go Fozen. Then there's the other route, which is that, no, I don't need to lock my intensity down. Everyone else has to be as intense as me when they're weak. And these type of Naiji who are confused and don't have a good connection with their other, their Nijai other, they are thinking that anything that's not like them is incorrect, and so often they will pair up as far as like a significant other, a lover, with another Naiji or a Naizi or Jinai or Baiji or whatever, but they basically double down on directedness, which is the opposite of what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be going with your other. You're supposed to take your natural powers and growing them in order to connect with your other. But if you actually take on a significant other, for example, that actually is the same mojo you are, it can seem very comfortable, but actually you are preventing yourself from going where you're supposed to be going. So ironically, double directives generally think that they are super strong and other people are are weak. Actually, they're weak because they have not been able to be strong enough to be the hero they need to be to connect with their other alone. This is because the world and its inclemency has seemed so dire and so daunting to these kinds of Naiji that they have doubled down on their powers. It's like the idea, whether they know they're doing this or not, the idea of actually extending all the way out to your 8 powers is too much. It's too daunting. That's too great a task for you to handle with those kinds of Naiji. And so they basically decide to just do what they do on their conscious powers and stay in that small constricted pond. And they believe that makes them stronger. This is actually quite common, and it's something we'll have to deal with a lot because there are a lot of what we'll call Naiji power couples, where they pair up with another Naiji or another directive like themselves, and the couple is very good at maybe excelling in a given field. They're both maybe highly respected with a lot of acclaim. This is very, very common, and so that can be confusing because that can seem like, oh, they're doing the right thing by being double directed because they're getting a lot of worldly success. No, they've just actually become lopsided on directedness, and that's something we'll have to talk about a lot because Naiji can become preoccupied with how to deal with the world. Dealing with the world is a big concern for Naiji, so it needs to be done correctly because other options can present themselves and seem like that's the way to go, and they're incorrect. Naiji have anger. This anger is actually the artistic sort, although it can move on up to spiritual, which is what it's meant to do, or it can descend in just physical violence. Naiji need to understand they do have issues with anger that they'll have to deal with and channel. Otherwise, they'll have to deal with depression or collateral damage in their life due to intense outbursts of anger. Even just getting the voice raised. When Naiji get angry, even just without physical violence, the energy that comes off of us is alarming to other humans. That's a good thing when we're actually trying to teach a class, for example, or move someone with an artistic work. We want to make it to where we are unfucking forgettable. So that's a good thing, but we have to be sure it's done in the right context, or we'll be unforgettable the way we wish we were forgettable. Sub-ROMs. This is a social alchemy that is not one of the official 20. It's actually technically within the Romantics. The Naiji and the Xiaonie are both Romantics, but those two mojos share a lot of similarities, so we refer to them together as a pair often, and we call them the sub-ROMs, the subjective Romantics. And this is one because, for example, the Naiji, as a Naiji male, the Naiji male and the Xiaonie male, or the Naiji female and the Xiaonie female, often get confused in mojo reading. So it's important to actually know the differences between the Naiji and the Xiaonie. One, so you can be a better friend to that mojo, but also so you can better understand your nature, because a lot of sort of story tropes in movies and whatnot, and books, and the way people interact, they often confuse the two sub-ROMs. So you may find yourself having a sub-ROM story put on you that's not you. It's often because people confuse unconsciously, for example, Naiji with Xiaonie, they'll unconsciously treat you as if you were that. So it's important you actually know what you are, what signals you're giving off, particularly signals that can be easily confused. That goes back to social alchemy, for example, of two other mojos like the Naiji and the Jinai. Those are mojos that we can easily be confused with, both ourselves and others. So it's important that you not be confused by that, because that will make sure that you have a good awareness of self. So sub-ROMs is another one. You want to make sure you know the similarities and the differences. And by being able to compare and contrast those two mojos really well, the Naiji and the Xiaonie, it's very beneficial for learning about yourself. Another of these informal social alchemies is the Jez Hunters. The Naiji and Vaiji are what we call Jez Hunters, and they're both part of the Hunter group, and they're both part of the Jez Mojos. So they are already in two groups together, but they kind of occupy a special duo together, which is they're the only two mojos that actually have a worldview followed up by Ji. And so for this reason, they share a lot in common, and they also can come into a unique form of conflict with each other, because they actually do hunt in similar waters. And so it's important that we know how to identify the differences between a Naiji and a Vaiji, so you know for sure what you are, and that you know how to deal with the Vaiji so that you actually can have a good Jez Hunter relationship. So the more you're able to understand how a given relationship is supposed to work, the better it can work. And the Naiji and Vaiji friendship is an important one. Another informal one is the Naiji with the Xiaonie. The Naiji actually often enjoy friendships with both the Xi Alpha, the Xi V, as mentioned, with the cave dwelling and the dissociation, but we also enjoy hanging out with the Xiaonie. The difference is the kinds of activities that are preferred. You can think of the Naiji with Xi V as sort of like survivalistic cave dwellers, and the Naiji with Xiaonie as more like experimental lab partners. So there's a lot of fun that Naiji and Xiaonie do together, composing music, scientific experiments, all kinds of things. And this is actually, I guess, a subgroup of the Special Club, because both the Naiji and Xiaonie are in the subjective interpretives, but they're the subjective interpretives that also like Xi. They enjoy Xi and Ji, and so for that reason, there is a special kind of bond they have when they're doing lab work together. And so that's what we'll talk about as well. Now that you've been exposed to a lot of the major topics that will be discussed in Naiji Temple, it's time to sort of take a look at some practical application. And we're going to use the virtual village a lot, which will come from the show that Jaileen's doing, the Mojo Show. In there's going to be a lot of mojos, and the Naiji are one of the most populous, so that's an advantage for you as Naiji, as there's quite a few Naiji for you to look at again, because we're so popular in pop culture. But that's something that you should start doing right away, is watching lots of videos of Naiji. That's the quickest way to start getting an idea of what we look like and the great variety of our manifestations. So that's a tool put up there for you, and Xiaoling's working very hard to have that available for you, and so you should really take advantage of that. We will use these celebrities to reference things a lot, because oftentimes when trying to explain to another Naiji, for example, like how their powers work or what they're supposed to do in a given situation, the way you would do it is that if we knew someone in common, like a Naiji, like say several Naiji, I would reference like how so-and-so did such and such when they were somewhere, right? Remember that time? Right, that's how humans naturally talk. It's a very natural dialogue. And it's a very good way to talk about a very nuanced subject such as the human condition.